Have you ever finished reading a page only to realize you have no idea what you just read? You're not alone. The frustration of spending hours with a book or an article just for the information to slip away days or even hours later is a universal experience. But what if you could fundamentally change that? What if you could move from passively scanning words to actively absorbing and using knowledge? This isn't about a simple memory trick. It's about understanding how your brain is wired to learn and then giving it the right kind of workout. In this video, we will unpack a powerful learning framework known as the PACER system. This is a structured method designed to help you not just remember but truly understand and apply everything you read. The common assumption is that learning is about consumption. The more you read, the more you know. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the learning process, and it's the reason why so many people hit a plateau. The secret to lasting retention isn't about how much goes in, it's about how much stays in. Effective learning is a balanced cycle of two distinct stages, consumption and digestion. Most people spend almost all their time on consumption, trying to read faster or for longer periods. They binge on information, but without proper digestion, the brain, much like a stomach, simply can't hold it all. This imbalance is why you can study for hours and still feel like you've gained very little. The goal, therefore, shifts from trying to remember everything to strategically processing information so it becomes usable knowledge. This shift in perspective is the first and most critical step toward becoming a more efficient learner. To illustrate this point, consider the story of Kim Peek, the real-life inspiration for the film Rain Man. Kim was a savant with an almost perfect recall. He could read 2 pages at once, one with each eye, and retain the vast majority of it. He memorized thousands of books, from history to literature to maps. Yet, despite this incredible ability to consume and store information, Kim Peek struggled with abstract reasoning and applying his knowledge to solve novel problems. This highlights a crucial distinction. Rote memorization is not the same as functional understanding. For most learning goals, especially in higher education and professional life, application is the true measure of knowledge. The aim is not to become a living encyclopedia, but to build a robust mental framework that you can actually use. The PACER system is designed specifically to build that framework. The PACER system is an acronym that stands for 5 distinct categories of information. The core premise is that you cannot process all information in the same way. Using the wrong mental process for a specific type of information is inefficient and leads to the very forgetting we are trying to avoid. By learning to identify the category of information as you consume it, you can then apply a targeted digestion technique, dramatically increasing how much you retain and how easily you can access it. Let's begin with the first category, procedural information. This is the how-to knowledge. It includes instructions, step-by-step processes, and physical or mental skills. Learning a new software program, a surgical technique, or a language, these are all heavily procedural. The key digestion process for procedural information is practice. The goal is application. This means you should attempt to use or perform the skill as soon as possible after learning it. The critical mistake many make is delaying practice. They read about how to do something, take extensive notes, and plan to practice later. But by then, the procedural details have often faded. The principle of balance is vital here. If you don't have the time to practice a skill immediately, it is often more effective to pause your consumption rather than continuing to overload your brain with instructions it cannot immediately use. The second category is analogous information. This is any new information that connects to something you already understand. It's about seeing patterns and relationships. For instance, if you understand how a water pump works, you can use that as an analogy for understanding the human heart. The digestion process for analogous information is critique. This is the step that is almost universally missed. Creating an analogy is only the first part. To solidify the connection, you must actively examine it. How are the two things similar? In what important ways are they different? Where does the analogy break down? This active critique forces a deeper level of processing, moving the information from an isolated fact to an integrated part of your existing knowledge network. This act of linking new knowledge to old is one of the most powerful mechanisms for long-term retention identified by learning science. The third category, and often the most voluminous in academic subjects, is conceptual information. This is the what and the why. It encompasses facts, theories, principles, and the relationships between them. The targeted digestion process for conceptual information is mapping. Conceptual knowledge does not exist in a linear list in an expert's mind. It exists as a dynamic, interconnected network. The digestion process, therefore, involves creating a visual map of these concepts and their connections, such as a mind map or a concept map. This technique forces you to move beyond the sequential presentation of a textbook and to actively construct a web of meaning for yourself. As you read and consume more information, you add to and reorganize this map. This doesn't just help you remember, it helps you understand the underlying structure of the subject, which is essential for complex problem solving. The final two categories are closely related and are processed in a similar but distinct way. The E in PACER stands for evidence information. This is the concrete data that supports conceptual understanding, specific dates, statistics, case studies, or quotes. The process for evidence is store and rehearse. Store means you efficiently note it down in a secondary system like a digital notebook or flashcards. The rehearse part happens later. This involves actively recalling the evidence and practicing how you would use it to support an argument or explanation. You do not try to memorize it on the spot during consumption. The R in PACER stands for reference information. This is highly specific, often granular data that you need to recall on demand, but which doesn't fundamentally alter your conceptual grasp. Examples include mathematical constants, specific chemical formulas, or code syntax. Like evidence, the process is store and rehearse. However, for reference information, the rehearsal is often best done through spaced repetition systems like flashcard apps, which are highly efficient for this type of pure recall. The crucial difference lies in the intent of rehearsal. For evidence, you rehearse its application. For reference, you rehearse its direct retrieval. The most common error and a massive drain on efficiency is treating reference or evidence information like conceptual information and trying to understand it in a deep way, which is unnecessary. Conversely, neglecting the digestion of procedural, analogous, and conceptual information in favor of memorizing references is a fundamental misallocation of your mental effort. By now, you understand the 5 categories of the PACER system and their corresponding digestion processes. The power of this method lies in the intentional pairing of information type with cognitive process. The ultimate key to making it work is maintaining that essential balance between the consumption of new material and the digestion of what you've already taken in. Over-consuming without digesting is the primary cause of the feeling of being overwhelmed and the reality of poor retention. To learn more, you don't always need to read more, you often need to process what you've already consumed more effectively. This systematic approach transforms learning from a haphazard activity into a strategic, manageable, and highly effective process. This framework provides the structure, but mastering efficient learning involves many other interconnected skills and principles. If you want to explore these advanced strategies without spending years on research, consider subscribing to our channel for more content designed to upgrade your learning capabilities. If you found this breakdown helpful, let us know in the comments and suggest other complex topics you'd like us to explore. Thank you for watching. Have you ever finished a book and a week later struggled to recall even the main ideas? You read, you highlight, you might even take notes, but the information just doesn't seem to stick. This feeling is not a reflection of your intelligence, but a sign that you might be using the wrong tools for the job. Your brain processes different kinds of information in fundamentally different ways, and using a one-size-fits-all approach is why you feel like you're constantly forgetting. What if you had a map for your mind? A system that tells you exactly what to do with each piece of information you encounter. This video is about that system. It's a framework called PACER designed to move you from passive consumption to active strategic learning. The first step is to dismantle a common myth that learning is primarily about getting information into your head. The real bottleneck isn't input, it's processing. Think of it like eating. You can consume a huge meal, but if your digestive system can't handle it, you gain little nutrition and feel uncomfortable. Learning works the same way. It's a two-stage cycle. Stage 1 is consumption, where you take in new information. Stage 2 is digestion, where your brain processes and stores that information for long-term use. Most people spend almost all their time and energy on consumption, hoping that more input will magically lead to more retention. But without dedicated digestion, the brain simply can't hold on to it all. This is why you can read for 3 hours and feel like you've only gained 10 minutes of lasting knowledge. The secret to unlocking your memory isn't reading more, it's processing smarter. To understand why perfect recall is neither possible nor desirable, consider the case of Kim Peek. Known as the real Rain Man, Kim possessed an extraordinary memory. He could read 2 pages simultaneously, one with each eye, and recall over 12,000 books with astonishing detail. However, despite this incredible ability, he struggled with abstract concepts and applying his knowledge to solve everyday problems. This illustrates the crucial point. The goal of learning is not to become a database, but to build a toolkit. You want knowledge you can use, not just facts you can recite. The PACER system is engineered specifically to build that usable toolkit. PACER is an acronym that categorizes all information into 5 distinct types. Why categorize? Because each type requires a specific mental process to be effectively locked into memory. Using the right process for the right information is the difference between efficient learning and futile cramming. Let's break down each letter and its corresponding action. The P stands for procedural information. This is your how-to knowledge. The steps to perform a statistical analysis in R, the sequence for a perfect golf swing, the method for negotiating a contract, these are all procedural. The defining characteristic of procedural information is that it is learned through doing. Therefore, the digestion process for procedural information is practice. The key is immediacy. As soon as you encounter a new procedure, you should attempt to simulate or execute it. The most common error is to read about a procedure and then delay practicing it until right before an exam. By then, the mental blueprint has faded and you're essentially relearning it from scratch. If you cannot practice it immediately, it is often more effective to pause your consumption rather than continue, ensuring you don't overwhelm your cognitive load. Next is the A, which stands for analogous information. This is any new concept that reminds you of something you already know. It's the mental bridge you build between the new and the familiar. For example, learning about electrical circuits might remind you of a plumbing system. This act of connection is powerful, but it's only half the battle. The digestion process for analogous information is critique. This is the step most people completely omit. It's not enough to simply note the similarity. You must actively interrogate the analogy. In what specific ways is an electrical circuit like a plumbing system? Where does the comparison break down? Are the differences more important than the similarities? This active critique strengthens the neural pathways, embedding the new information within your existing web of knowledge. It transforms a standalone fact into a reinforced part of your understanding. The third category is C, for conceptual information. This forms the backbone of most academic and professional knowledge. Concepts, theories, principles, and the relationships between them, this is conceptual information. Unlike a linear book, knowledge in an expert's mind exists as a vast, interconnected network. Your goal as a learner is to reconstruct that network in your own mind. The digestion process, therefore, is mapping. This involves creating nonlinear visual representations of the ideas, such as mind maps or concept maps. Mapping forces you to identify the connections and hierarchies, moving beyond rote memorization to genuine comprehension. As you read, you don't just take notes, you build and refine a map. You add new nodes, draw connections, and reorganize the structure as your understanding deepens. It is the most effective way to digest the complex, interrelated ideas that constitute deep learning. The final two categories, E and R, are often confused, but distinguishing them is critical for efficiency. E is for evidence information. These are the concrete specifics that support your conceptual framework, a key statistic from a research paper, a specific historical date, a relevant quote. The process for evidence is store and rehearse. Store means you efficiently deposit it into a reliable external system, a digital notebook, a flashcard app, or directly onto your concept map. The crucial part is that you do not try to memorize it during consumption. You simply capture it. The rehearse part is scheduled for later. This rehearsal isn't passive rereading, it's active application. You use the evidence in practice essays, in problem solving, or by explaining it aloud. This practices the skill of deploying evidence to support an argument, which is how you'll actually use it. R is for reference information. This is highly detailed, factual data that you need to recall on demand, but which doesn't change your core conceptual understanding, like a specific mathematical constant or a line of code syntax. The process is also store and rehearse, but the nature of the rehearsal is different. For reference information, the goal is pure, accurate recall. This makes it perfectly suited for tools like spaced repetition flashcards. The fundamental error to avoid here is spending your valuable consumption time trying to memorize these references through repetition. This steals time and mental energy from the more demanding digestion processes required for procedural, analogous, and conceptual information. Prioritizing the memorization of references over the deep processing of concepts is a primary reason for inefficient studying. The true power of the PACER system emerges when you maintain the balance between Stage 1 and Stage 2. For every hour spent consuming new information from a book or a lecture, a significant portion of time must be reserved for the active digestion of that information. This means that sometimes the most productive step is to stop reading and start processing. This is counterintuitive. Our instinct is to push forward, to cover more ground. But the learning process obeys biological rules. Your working memory has a limited capacity. By consciously applying the correct process, practice, critique, mapping, or store and rehearse, you ensure that the information is not just seen but seen and understood. Mastering the balance between consumption and digestion is just one component of a much larger learning architecture. There are numerous other cognitive principles and techniques that interact with this framework to compound your efficiency. If you want to explore these advanced strategies and continue upgrading your ability to learn, our channel is dedicated to breaking down these complex systems. If you found this framework valuable, please like the video and subscribe for more content. Your support helps us create more detailed breakdowns like this one. Thank you for